My name is Shreya, and I'm excited to be here today. As the Catalyst Program Director, I have the honor of not only administering the Catalyst Award each year, but getting to support the recipients through programs such as this one. We have a great and wow, so timely conversation lined up for you today. Our featured speaker today is Renae Reynolds. Renae is the Executive Director of the Tri-State Transportation Campaign, an organization that has championed equity in our transportation system for the past 30 years. Her work addresses the environmental justice disparities in transportation, from air pollution to public transit access and affordability. And prior to leading the campaign, she served as transportation planner for the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, where she helped the Metropolitan Transportation Authority commit to 100% zero emissions fleet by 2040. Renae is also the 2024 recipient of the Rachel's Network Catalyst Award. And for those who may not know, funds for the award are provided directly by our Women Environmental Funder members. The application review and selection process weaves together efforts by women across our sector, so environmental funders, Rachel's Network members, past awardees, and other women of color leaders in the environmental movement. This year's Catalyst Award is opening tomorrow. So we're going to drop a link where you can bookmark it. It'll be ready to go tomorrow. And if you are signed up for our Friends Digest, our communications, you'll get an email as well this week. Welcome, Renae. We're so excited to have you here. And Renae will be interviewed today by former Rachel's Network Catalyst Awardee and current board member, Annel Hernandez. Annel teaches environmental justice and climate resiliency at the Columbia School of International Public Affairs. She was the associate director of the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, where she worked with Renae on city and statewide climate policy issues. She's also a recipient of the 2019 Catalyst Award and was recently elected to the Rachel's Network Board of Directors. Annel, I'll pass things to you to get us started.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shreya and Jamie, for the introductions and for putting together this discussion today. And hello, Renae. I'm always very excited to have conversations with you and talk transportation. It was truly such a pleasure to work together in the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, and after that, continuing to see your important environmental and transportation work grow. So today we have two New Yorkers talking about public transit, equity, and climate justice. So let's dive right into it. Renae, can you tell us about your career journey and what brought you to the Tri-State Transportation Campaign?
Sure. Well, I'll start off by saying it was definitely not the most direct route into transportation work. I have a lot of colleagues in the space that went to transportation planning school. They were planners or they, studied traffic engineering, all these other things. I would say that my started with the examination of my urban environment. And so I could probably pinpoint that all the way back to undergraduate school and just understanding my neighborhood in comparison to other people's neighborhoods. And I think that's where the curiosity started. But then in 2012, I started thinking about going into graduate school, and I thought about what I would study. And at the time, I think I was, God, I was a real estate agent. Shh, don't tell anyone. And I really thought, this is a really unfair process by which people get housing. And so I started thinking about going into the theories of urban practice. This was the program that I studied in graduate school, under the auspice of wanting to participate in equalizing the playing field on like urban development. And then because of the state of housing, I moved to one of the farthest flung neighborhoods in New York City called Far Rockaway. And there my world expanded in understanding the impact of transportation on people's everyday lives, because I was the second to last stop on the A train and I needed to travel all the way into Midtown Manhattan, 14th Street, to get to class. And so that was a 2-hour commute most times one way, and could be worse at night if you decided to stay at school longer to study, or even, God forbid, socialize with people. Um, if you missed a certain transfer on the A train, you could be stuck out there for hours. And so at the same time, I was also working at a community-based organization called the Rockaway Waterfront Alliance. And that organization was working on getting young people to understand their ecological surrounds. So there was this confluence of understanding how community engagement plays a role in shaping your environment. But transportation was kind of a little bit in the background at that point. So after working at the Rockaway Waterfront Alliance, I then went to work on more localized environmental impact post-Sandy with the Forest Service, United States Forest Service. Like I said, it's not a direct route. And there, I was working on like urban farming and people's like stewardship of land. And after that project, working 2 years with that agency, I saw a position open up at the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. And I think it was more directly related. Actually don't remember the position I applied for. Annel, you probably know, because you were part of the interviewing panel. But I think it was more around, environmental resilience, or, climate resilience. And but what I shared in terms of my personal experience sparked something, or the executive director, Eddie Batista, noticed something in what I was sharing and thought I would be better suited for the transportation planner position. And at the time, I was really kind of disappointed that I didn't get what I was going after. But then I was handed a really great opportunity to examine and to participate in two very key campaigns. One was to get the MTA to electrify its bus fleet, and the other was to pass congestion pricing into law. So those were my two major campaigns that I was issued, day one, first time being a transportation planner. And it was like, hey, you kid, change the world. And so like that's how I got started in transportation advocacy, was just expressing my personal experience and someone recognizing the importance of that experience, and how transportation actually frames so much of our life's experiences and what we have access to, and also its direct impact on our environment.
Wonderful. Is there anything you want to add about Tri-State and being the executive director for the past few years?
Yeah, so I mean, Tri-State Transportation Campaign is a nonprofit advocacy organization, and we are dedicated to sustainable transportation for a myriad of reasons. But I think the core four reasons being that we want safer streets for people to be able to walk and bike and, just traverse safely, and reduce our traffic fatalities. We want to reduce our emissions in the transportation sector, because the transportation sector is the most impactful emitter of climate emissions nationally, globally, and second most, I think, in the state and the city. We want to make transportation affordable. So we advocate for deep investments into mass transportation. And we want to make it accessible. And so that means that everyone, no matter your age and disability or ability, you have access to mobility, because it is a determinant of your economic potential, your educational attainment, your public health conditions, and your environment. So Tri-State has been around for 30 years, almost 32 now, I think in October. And it is an organization that really contributes to the space. When we have folks that work on environmental issues, so many advocates, but making that connection, making that intersection clear between transportation and the environment is huge. And we're one of the leading organizations in the tri-state region doing that. So I'm very proud to have been selected as the executive director in 2021, and have been fighting my little butt off for the last nearly 4 years to keep the legacy going and to strengthen our core mission, which I think has to be centering equity and justice and the fight for transportation, because we know historically the development of our transportation systems has had deep impacts in terms of its injustice to certain communities of color that were sacrificed to build our highway systems, and those same communities now that suffer from a lack of access to rich mobility options.
Great, thank you. One of the things you highlighted that I think is really important is just the intersectionality of transportation issues. So can you talk a little bit more about why people should care about transportation as an environmental issue, as a justice issue, and as an environmental justice issue specifically?
Okay, let me get on my soapbox. Transportation is everything. I always tell Annel this, like, it is one of the biggest systems in our world that impacts our everyday lives, but it's almost made invisible by its, the fact that we kind of take it for granted, right? We think about it in terms of getting from point A to point B. But in that process, depending on the mode that we're taking, we are being affected by environmental blowback. So from tailpipe emissions, right, we are exposed to PM 2.5 or fine particulate matter, black carbon, all these invisible nitrous oxide, all these invisible chemicals that are affecting us on a daily basis. It's the reason why our environmental justice communities are part of the reason, a contributing factor to the reason why so many in our environmental justice communities suffer from higher rates of asthma and higher rates of hospitalization due to respiratory issues. And so one of the things that we used to do at NEJA, we used to produce a lot of maps. And GIS was not necessarily my strong suit, but Annel and I used to put our heads together all the time on and overlaying a lot of these issues. So one example was just where our local transit buses are located, our depots. And we overlaid, the location of the bus depots and on our environmental justice map, and lo and behold, 75% of the bus depots that are located in New York City are located in environmental justice communities. And those are the communities that are suffering from exposure from idling buses and the, various activities at these polluting in industries. And so those are also the communities that are most directly affected or threatened by climate impacts like storm surge, all these other kind of conflating issues. We were able to visualize it, but transportation specifically, I think, is key to understanding our environmental justice issues in New York City and across the nation, because you also see in mapping out our transportation system that our environmental justice communities are the ones that are surrounded by our highways, right? In the South Bronx, you have communities that are surrounded by highways. And so there's no wonder why these communities are affected by the public health issues that they are impacted by. And so, we know that our greenhouse gas emissions, right, are what's driving our climate crisis. And so it's really important for us to make that link between what we're seeing in communities when we are impacted by superstorms, by flooding, by all these extreme weather patterns that are continuing to increase, that we're making the link to the systems that are driving that kind of change.
Thank you. And I mean, not just in New York, you can look at maps of any American city, and the communities where the highways run through are the low-income communities, are the communities of color. And so it's true for transportation, and it's true for a lot of other polluting sources. So trying to look a little bit more forward and positive, optimistic, what's your vision for the future of transportation?
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, I grew up in New York City, and that's with all our issues, it's still a very transit-rich-ish city. I grew up in Queens, where I always say this, I grew up in Queens where the bus is king. And so it was very important, I think, to me being able to get to resources, important resources, like, going to college and going to graduate school, to be able to have access to mass transit because I didn't have a car. But unfortunately, because of the lack of connectivity, especially north-south connectivity in New York City, I ended up having to make the decision to purchase a vehicle back in 2017 because to get from one place south in Queens, from Far Rockaway, to north in Bayside, just looking at the commute time, just when I got like my first big job with the U.S. Forest Service, it was a 3-hour commute. Now, I'd already said 2 hours. I blew your mind with 2 hours, a 3-hour commute to get from Queens to Queens. And so, like, my vision of the future is that there is no such thing as a 3-hour one-way commute from to get to any point in one borough to another point in that same borough, or anywhere in the 5 boroughs. In fact, it's a future that pulls us further away from our car dependency, and really prioritizes people over highways, and people's connectivity, real and true connectivity, meaning access to different modes of getting around, that we're not having to get into a car to drive a mile distance, that we're able to walk and bike safely. And in a little bit like sort of nostalgic and idyllic way, in the 90s, as a kid growing up, I used to see kids riding their bicycles on the street all the time. And it's few and far between now, unless you live in a community very well organized, that has at the local level improved its infrastructure enough to allow for that, or has communities that have organized like bus rides, safe routes, to get to school and things like that. So I think it's a future that sees the benefit of mass transit as the premier way of getting around. And then also, and obviously I'm not anti-car, I'm just like anti-car all the time. Because I think that it's really important for us to have that, choice, to be able to say, today I'm going to take the train, or today I'm going to take the bus, or today I'm going to walk, I'm going to bike, I'm going to do all these other things that enrich my life and don't have me stuck in traffic, losing my mind, and having like road rage or anything. Not like I have road rage, but just saying.
And so is that what you mean when you say multimodality?
Yes, absolutely. Just having a multiplicity of ways to get around. And we have great examples, international examples of cities that have done this masterfully. One of my favorite transportation experiences thus far has been traveling to Rotterdam and Amsterdam and seeing the ease of transport for folks who are not in vehicles. To see people who are able to ride around with like 10 kids and on the back of a bicycle. I mean, that was unbelievable to experience. And so it's a hard road. We've made a lot of progress in increasing our bus lanes and bike lanes in New York, but it is still very much a fragmented system, and one that is constantly under threat.
So you already talked a little bit about how public transit has positively impacted your life, to school, hopefully to parties, to wherever the train takes you to. And I will add, anytime I'm stuck on a train or dealing with delays, I'll text Renae and be like, "Hey, what's going on? Can you do something about these train delays?" So I'm still waiting on some of the fixes, but um, can you tell us a little bit about what, like, the current state of mass transit? Like, what is it that we need?
Oh, in New York, we need money. We have the largest mass transit agency in the nation here in New York City. So we're very lucky. We have nearly 6,000 buses that service our neighborhoods, our communities, and millions of people who depend on our trains to get around every day. And we have always had a challenge of funding that system, because it is so large, because it is so expansive, and also because its infrastructure is aging and has been directly impacted by climate change. Superstorm Sandy did a number on so much of what was already old infrastructure. And so I think, for the most part, our transit system is very strong in that ridership continues to increase post the COVID pandemic. So in terms of the demand for mass transit, it's there. But the infrastructure, the need for funding our capital programs, this is the funding that allows MTA to undertake projects to improve and build out more of the mass transit system is very lacking. I think at last projection is something like maybe we're short of like somewhere around $37 billion to close the gap in our capital budget for MTA. So I think, as much support that we can get from the state in funding, and I'm gonna say the federal government, but that's I'm sure we'll talk about that soon. But as much support as we can in terms of financial support that we can get to continue to improve and sustain our transit system is very vital. I know that a lot of New Yorkers get upset about, train delays and things like that, and it's really important for them to know why. We're dealing with 100-year-old signal systems. We're dealing with aged tracks that, spark, and all kinds of madness occurs on them. But for the most part, we are still very fortunate. And I think that it's important to continue to build on that confidence by investing in our mass transit system as much as we can.
And just to highlight, the elevated train that runs just a block from my house was built about 115 years ago, and it's still heavily used every single day.
Mhm.
It's also, crumbling and, contaminated lead paint is just falling onto the street, and that is a very normal occurrence, right? Just to highlight the state of our transit system, but I definitely still depend on it every single day. Um, so you talked, you mentioned congestion pricing, you mentioned bus electrification. In both those issue areas, you had really meaningful, transformative policy wins. Can you talk about those a little bit more and what factors led to their success? What lessons you would share with other states and other regions that want to implement similar policies?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think, the connectivity between bus electrification and congestion pricing are very clear to me, but maybe not necessarily to someone from the outside looking in, right? These are two very important climate policies in my mind. The first, right, electrification is to drastically reduce our emissions from the transportation sector by turning over the entire bus fleet to 100% electric vehicles by 2050. And so that was a goal that was set in place back in 2017. At the same time, that my gosh, I was gonna say second push, but this was probably like the fifth push for congestion pricing in New York. But it was one that was fueled, well, not that pun,
Electrified.
electrified by the public transit crisis that occurred in the summer of 2017. We had the summer of hell where so many of our signals were failing in the transit system, in the train system, that people were trapped in on platforms with no air conditioning in sight. Yeah, that hence the summer of hell. Like people were really angry about the state of the train system in 2017. And so this was the catalyst, very much pun intended. This was the catalyst for so much of the advocacy that bubbled up in 2017. So I was part of a multi-table coalition effort to reintroduce congestion pricing into legislation. And the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance was key in that we were leaders on the grassroots side of the table. The organization I work for now, Tri-State Transportation Campaign, was also very integral in the sort of industry table. So this was the table that had your Renaes and your Uber and Lyft, who were also really very much in support of passing congestion pricing. And the argument was pretty simple, right? Congestion is bad for business. Congestion is bad for the environment. Congestion is bad for our public health, our mental health, all of these things. And so the program that was devised was meant to address the key issue, which is reducing congestion by disincentivizing driving. And how do you do that? You price it, because people don't like to pay for a lot of things or anything. And so by putting a price on it, you disincentivize some users who just are going to choose not to drive. But at the same time, those who must drive, whether it's for work or for industry, you have a business, you're whatever you're doing, you are contributing to a fund that will be invested back into mass transit. So one of the key pieces of the legislation that was crafted was that the funds from congestion pricing, the revenue generated from congestion pricing, would be placed into a lockbox. And that lockbox would only be accessible for capital improvement projects. So there was a lot of critique around the time that MTA couldn't be trusted, and that's an ongoing theme. And so it was really important for advocates to know that that funding was secured and that it was going to be contributed in the way that would support mass transit improvements. So it's this very holistic view of a pricing program, I think, and I think that's why it was really successful and passed in 2019. And I think on the other side of the equation, we didn't legislate bus electrification. We're still working on that. But what we did have was a very supportive MTA. At the time, Andy Byford was the head of the agency, and he was a very forward-thinking person. And so you had the will of leadership at MTA to commit to equity, and to commit to understanding its impact on the agency's impact on environmental justice and then on climate justice. And so that will was very important in the MTA holding itself accountable and saying, yes, we agree, we will set a goal of electrifying our entire fleet by 2050, and then set the the milestones in place to say we will purchase these many electric buses, to get to that end goal. So I see those two programs as being two very pivotal environmental and climate justice programs and policies that were passed in the same year.
Wonderful. So continuing on congestion pricing, I think it very quickly became a hot button issue. The media focus, the lawsuits from New Jersey, the opinion pieces out there, the memes, which were all over the place and great, the New York governor's pause, unexpected decrease in the toll amount, like every few months there was like something else being thrown your way. How do you balance the politics of it with the policy of it? And I will clarify for this question, let's focus on the local regional politics, setting aside the federal piece for now.
Yeah, I think it's actually linked to something that I forgot to say in the previous question. We had a lot of engagement with local politicians, our city council members, our and our legislative members in the immediate push for congestion pricing between 2017 and 2019. And the engagement there was very important. One of the things about Tri-State as approach to advocacy has always been like leading strong with data. And so I think we balance what we know or what we understand to be a very vital policy that needs to be implemented in terms of the way that we craft narrative around that issue and how we invite our elected officials to become champions for the change that we want to see. So, and one of the things that we developed to help support the passage of congestion pricing was a set of fact sheets that really laid bare the reality, because we could hear all the rhetoric, right? The noise is going to be, this is a cash grab. This will hurt low-income people. People can't afford this, that, and the other. But the data that we were able to present showed that the vast majority of people in New York City and even in New Jersey coming into New York City were doing so on mass transit, right? And we drilled down district level by district level across New York and across northern New Jersey. And we're able to identify the fact that less than 3% of all work commutes into the central business district was by vehicle, was by car. So 97% of people are taking the train in your district or the bus in your district, and you're telling us that you don't care about that vast majority of your constituents. When that is presented to a politician, or when that is presented to communities who are hearing themselves be talked about in the media, and they can see themselves in the data and say, oh, wait, yeah, that's me. I'm on the bus. I'm the one that's stuck in the Lincoln Tunnel because there's so much traffic. It really changes the perception of the policy. And so it is definitely an uphill battle because we had a lot of scrutiny from the media and a lot of, I literally, gosh, I think I got into an argument with a reporter once at a rally. One of the first major things that happened was that Governor Murphy and Gottheimer in New Jersey said that they were going to sue. That was like early summer of 2024. And so they planned to announce this at some secret location. And so being the stealthy, advocates that we are, we found the location and we bird dogged them at that event. And I remember speaking to a reporter who was out there, and he was kind of just like candidly talking to us about congestion pricing and how much he hated it. And I was like, do you take the bus? Do you know anyone that takes the bus? It becomes a very personal thing for folks. So people who are driving in their cars, a lot of them have a perception that you're trying to punish them for being in their vehicles, where in reality, less traffic means a better commute for you too, as a driver. And so we've been on a very long journey. As you mentioned, the political winds can shift very quickly. And sometimes your allies become enemies. The governor was a staunch advocate, we thought, for congestion pricing for a very long time. And then we got surprised, in June, when weeks before the program was supposed to go active, she arbitrarily paused it. And, you can still speculate till this day why that happened. And a lot of what I've heard has been more about personal opinion on the policy as opposed to any real factual basis for doing that. And that's a shame because we lost a lot of vital time to have the program active during the summer. And our fight became, oh, great, now we have to battle the governor. And so allies of ours actually sued the governor. Niger sued the governor. And we were amici'd on that. We were part of an amicus brief on that lawsuit to say that this is illegal. You can't do this. This is a legal process. You don't get to interfere with that. And then also it's directly impactful on an environmental front because there was so much at stake in terms of mitigation money that would have been allocated to environmental justice communities in the South Bronx to respond to any potential unintended consequences or traffic being diverted from the central business district up to the South Bronx. Fortunately, where we are now, well, where we were this morning was that after a month of congestion pricing being in effect, right? So we were successful in challenging the governor and at reactivating the program. The MTA was successful in defending itself from various lawsuits, both from New York and New Jersey. And the program was able to be activated finally on January 5th of 2025. Miracle of miracles, right? finally, the first ever congestion pricing program in the nation has been established. And just after 1 month of the program being active, we had what I think we can say are the early impressions of success of the program. Traffic, overall reductions in traffic coming into the central business district down by 50%. Right? Traffic on the Holland Tunnel was they experienced the highest reduction, 65% reduction in the Holland Tunnel, and I think it was 35% on Canal Street. So one of the things that was really helpful, I think, just from a personal standpoint, is I live in New Jersey now, right? I moved to New Jersey, and because I don't have access to a train in my neighborhood, when I'm coming into the city, sometimes I drive. And so I could say, like anecdotally, that I saw drastic improvements to my commute. And I'm also willing to pay the congestion pricing fee because I know that there is an impact from my vehicle into this community. And so why not, be a contributor in a positive way? And like I went from having 30-minute wait times to get through the Lincoln Tunnel to sailing through the tunnel in 10 minutes and getting to my office, that it was unheard of, like to be able to reduce the travel time that much. And so I'll stop there. So it's been good.
Yeah.
It's been good.
No, I mean, I think some of that initial data is really exciting to see, and it's had such an impact on emissions, on people's daily commutes, and even on noise. A lot of folks in Manhattan have been saying, because New Yorkers love to honk their horns at any inconvenience. And so a lot of that has been reduced as well. And creating more spaces, right, for community, for social cohesion, a lot of open streets, right? So a lot of that also goes hand in hand with other urban planning ideas. But before we get into what happened this morning, Renae, can you remind us one more time what the congestion pricing revenue would have funded?
Okay. So the congestion pricing revenue would support the MTA's capital budget. You have an operating budget and you have a capital budget. So the program was designated, it was supposed to support the 2024 capital budget. So that grand total was something around $52 billion. So congestion pricing revenue was slated to generate around just under $2 billion a year. I think it was like 1.7, 1.8 billion dollars a year from toll revenue. And that money would go directly into capital improvements. So that's installation of new elevators, right? So that our entire subway system is finally 100% accessible at some point, as we're still woefully behind. I think only like somewhere around 30% of the system is accessible, or 30-something%. It also would have contributed to the purchasing of electric vehicles. And you may note that when congestion pricing was activated in January, the MTA immediately announced a purchase of over 500 new electric buses for their fleet. It would contribute directly to signal improvements to be able to speed up trains and expand our train system through the final completion of the Second Avenue subway extension that has been dragging on for quite some time. And so it is money that is slated to do nothing but improve mass transit. So that's a very important piece to continue to hammer home as people are subject to so much rhetoric, so many arguments about congestion pricing, and so many that are politically motivated, so many who feel like because if they use congestion pricing as a hot button topic, they will be able to win an election. So it's really important for us and our organization to continue to tell the story in as factual a manner as possible, and to have New Yorkers and just transit riders all around the region see themselves in the story, that this is an investment in them more than anything else.
Thank you. And I'm still hoping for the Interborough Express through Brooklyn and Queens. So let me know if you can help with that.
I can write a letter to the governor.
Um, so this morning, this afternoon, just 30 minutes or so before we started this conversation, the Trump administration and his minions started an effort to retract their approval of congestion pricing and try to stop it. I know that this doesn't come as a surprise for you. If anything, you were likely expecting it based on all the threats during the presidential campaign. But what is your initial reaction? How does Tri-State Transportation Campaign move forward?
The very initial reaction, I think, is a mixture of rage and disbelief. As much as we, there was this expectation that there would be this ongoing threat of it, I think the boldness in which, the gall of that letter just saying, we're rescinding the VPPP, or the value pricing pilot program, is astonishing, because that's just not how governance works. The VPPP is a program that was established by Congress in 1991, right? And so there was a process, an environmental review process that was undertaken, and that process was very thorough. And, we had a much more, I think, thoughtful and science and data-driven administration under the Biden administration. And so I believe that, they were very thorough in their examination of this program. I know that because I was part of the meetings and conversations where MTA was talking about the litany of questions and evidence that they had to provide. Over 1,000-page environmental assessment report was conducted and produced in order to receive the approval of the FHWA, or Federal Highway Administration, in order to activate this program. And we know that this has no merit, because it has been very clearly expressed by Trump that he just didn't like the program. He thought that it would be a business killer. He had a lot of opinions about it. And though the data has been proving him wrong, I think that, a reasonable person might think, okay, maybe this will be just what is necessary in order to change opinions. But I think for someone like that person, who is like very much ego driven, it is probably just what he needed to say, like, I'm gonna assert my power here wherever I see I think I have it. And so I think the benefit, if I can see any in this, is that it was a very rash decision. It's not based in any sort of legality. It's unprecedented, and it really sets a really bad standard to say that any the federal government could rip away environmental approval on a whim. It's never happened before. And so what we are banking on is that there is just no legal standing to do this. And so There will be a legal fight.
Mhm.
And there will be, the Trump administration will be sued and hopefully we'll win. But I know that, I'll give you a little preview. I know that the MTA is not turning off the program because so that
Yeah,
letter,
I'm happy to hear that.
yes,
Happy
I
to hear.
think that their action plan moving forward is to submit papers to the court, filing for an injunction or a restraining order of some sort. And so like I think that they have everything in their corner to be successful on that front. So it's just, an unfortunate another bump in the road and another way that this administration has shown that it doesn't care about the environment, it doesn't care about people.
Mhm. We have a lot of fights ahead of us on so many environmental issues, so I wish you the best of luck, and let me know what you need. But
Thank you.
I want to move us to the Q&A section, but just wanted to ask the final question here on our in our conversation is, can you tell us about the impact that the Rachel's Network Catalyst Award has had on you and your work? And how can those on the webinar here today support your work?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, it's just amazing to see transportation, being seen as part of the fight for our environment. It's vindicating in so many ways because this was the thing that I was trying to accomplish in my role at NEJA to try to make transportation sort of more obvious and clear and, appreciated and all the things, um, that us like nerds do and understand on a regular basis. So I think first of all, just being a recipient of the Rachel's Network Award, the Catalyst Award, has just brought this visibility that is really beyond appreciated. And it's also like kind of built even more confidence in me because I have had to fight some big fights in tiny organizations. NEJA, we were tiny, what, 6 staff members? And it's the same here at Tri-State. We're 6 staff members. We punch way above our weight, and it just feels good to have someone sort of behind us, and it feels like Rachel's network is behind us, a little bit of wind beneath my wings at least, and also via the organization because I talk so much about Rachel's network to the staff now.
I,
What was the second part of that question?
how can those
And how
support you?
can, well, I think, keep in contact with us, see what we're up to. We have a newsletter on our website. Our website is www.tstc.org. I can drop it in the chat. Sign up to our newsletter and just like, see what we're up to. If you're so inclined, if we share publicly that we're going to have a rally for congestion pricing or for, oh my gosh, we didn't even talk about the New Yorkers for Transportation Equity, which is a whole nother push at the state level to reduce vehicle miles traveled. That's another bill. And we actually just recently went up to Albany to rally and lobby elected officials to support our Get Around New York bill. So if you go on our website, there's more about that there. So just like show as much love as you can to transportation advocates who are climate advocates and just justice warriors.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Renae. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing so much information about all the great transportation work that you're leading. So I want to move us toward answering some question from the audience. I see that Shreya, your hand is up, so go for it.
Well, you sort of answered part of my question, Renee, around how people can support transit or transportation rather. And I think
Mhm.
partly transportation has been kind of because it's has so many stakeholders, it's been maybe a harder issue for philanthropists to get into. So how can philanthropists, how can funders really support the transportation justice or transportation equity movement more broadly, especially in their own communities and in their own states?
That's a great question. I think it's just understanding it thematically, because sometimes philanthropy uh move together towards different, thematic issues. And so transportation is such an intersectional issue that we can toggle along on those themes, but sometimes it's not necessarily clear. I was talking to another group of folks who are plugged into another funder network, and they were saying that, a lot of philanthropy is focused on democracy work right now. And I'm like, transportation is also democracy work. Like, it's transportation advocacy is that too. So it's just recognizing that the it's a system that needs unpacking. It's a system that has so many tethers to public health, to education, to all the things, right? That, if you can understand that, then you don't lose sight of it, no matter where, the tides are shifting in the philanthropic space. And then I think at the local level, or I mean, I consider us still a local organization, even though we work in multiple states. Organizations like ours are always fighting the great capacity problem, right? We have big issues that we have to fight, and we have very small, tiny shoestring budgets. And so anywhere that flexible funding is coming from to support us to be able to pivot when we have to, it's gold, because sometimes we get stuck in like the programmatic dollars that we receive, and we have to do this thing, but then congestion pricing blows up, and I got to go over there, even though I'm not necessarily funded to the level that I would want to be able to take that work on. So as directly as I could say this, it's important now because there's a clear directive to attack everything that has to do with diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and an attempt to stifle our work. We are fortunate in that we don't have federal grants, but the municipalities that we advocate towards and push to do innovative things, they are beholden, and they are trying to figure out ways to change their language and things like that. So I think it's important to support the nimble nonprofit organizations that aren't beholden to any sort of like major bureaucratic shifts, because we're the ones that go and fight in way with different tools.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to jump in or drop it in the chat. I think, Heidi, were you raising your hand? You're on mute. Oh,
I'm
there you
on
go.
mute. This is kind of following up on Shreya's comment. I live in Chicago, equally congested city. And you may even know more about this than I do there. I guess there is a movement to move the CTA, the Metro, and the bus system all under one roof, which I think will be a really positive thing, because I think they're all losing money, and hopefully having just one oversight group would be a good thing. How would I find a similar group in Chicago? Just how do I Google it? How do I search for that? Or if you know of a group already off the top of your head.
Yes. I don't know a group off the top of my head, but I know that I probably can find a group within the network. But the first place that I was thinking of was Transit Center, because Transit Center organizes a national transit justice coalition. So I know that there are some Chicago groups within that network. So I'd be happy to follow up and maybe pass the information off to Shreya, and or anybody can get it to you. But yes, there are definitely a lot of organizations that are doing local work. So I'm happy to help connect you.
Thank you.
Great. Looks like we have some questions in the chat, so I'm gonna read them off. From Jamie, a pivot question. We have a lot of members who fund and work on nature conservation, specifically birds. Do you ever touch on the intersectionality of transportation and its impact on bird populations or other species conservation and biodiversity in your transportation and justice advocacy work?
You know, we don't, but that is an interesting space to think about. I think there was a conference that I went to in Colorado where I saw a lot of that sort of understanding about like transportation and its impact on biodiversity and the ways that roadways were being designed to create clear paths for animals moving, you know, safely and things like that. We haven't worked at that intersection, but there are a lot of important reasons why that work should be explored. I just haven't had the opportunity to work at that intersection yet, but.
Thank you. Well, one thing I will say is that I do take public transit up to go to hikes and to explore nature in New York State. I do not have a car. I'm a New Yorker through and through, so that is an important interconnection access. Just moving us on to the next question from Leticia. Is anyone training grassroots candidates to support these much needed transportation woes?
I would think, Lord, I'm trying to think of Annel, I'm trying to think of a group that we know we have in common. Oh my gosh, why is their name slipping me right now? We don't do that kind of training. Unfortunately, I think our 501c3 status would probably bar us from doing grassroots training. But I'm thinking of maybe Streets Pack. I don't know, actually. I could ask. I'm sorry, remember there was a time when I was doing congestion pricing work, and you had to do translation for me because we were meeting with a group. It's really bugging me. You know who this?
Renae has always tried to get me to do transportation work, and I'm like, no, I do the energy, I do the waste, the coastal, so I leave the transportation to you, Renae. But I'll follow up with another question unless folks want to jump in with the last question. Oh, Sarah, go for it.
I was curious, kind of building on Heidi's question, as you worked on congestion pricing, did you partner with other regions and cities, or are there other cities contemplating doing congestion pricing?
Mm-hmm. I didn't have too much direct regional engagement. I think our work was very much localized, but we did have the opportunity to learn from other cities. So there were convenings where London came to share about their experience in starting their congestion pricing program. Other colleagues, I think, also actually went and visited. We didn't have the budget to go to Stockholm or anything like that, which, you know, one day maybe. But I think that sort of cross-pollination, particularly with London, because they were the most similar system and more similar city to ours was really helpful in crafting the narrative and also just encouraging us because we knew that even in London, the vast majority of people were opposed to congestion pricing until it was implemented. And we could utilize the successes that they saw in like the drastic reduction in childhood asthma rates as one of the key points to emphasize in our campaigning to advocate for it. So I do know that there are other cities that definitely are looking at New York as an example. And so, you know, as much as this is like really challenging and really annoying to have to be dealing with again, we have activated it. And there is at least, you know, we have generated some data that can show that the program can work. And hopefully that will be beneficial to us in the long run, as there are so many other cities that are thinking about the ways that they resist the mandates that are coming down from the federal level, and that they stand strong for climate and for environmental justice.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for the questions, and I will now pass it over to Shreya.
Thank you. Thank you, Annel, for moderating such a great discussion. You know, the last time Renae and I, when actually she was doing her Catalyst interview, about an hour before was when Governor Kathy had decided to pause. So I feel like we get you every time something happens with congestion pricing, you're like hopping on a call with Rachel's network. So I'm so sorry that we keep doing that to you.
It's okay. I didn't even remember that, but that was it. But
It was
that's okay.
literally the same day.
Yeah.
But I have one closing question for you. So Renae,
Mhm.
as you know, and we think that care is very important to us here at Rachel's Network. What is one way that you replenish yourself as you have been fighting this fight and are gearing up to continue fighting this fight?
Oh boy. I don't know if I've been doing the best job of this of late because I just feel like there's been a lot going on. But one of the things that I try to do and will try to continue to build it as a regular practice is I go for I get massages. Because I tend to put all my stress into like this one shoulder over here. I internalize it and I know that I need to do that. Oh my gosh, I'm lying. I do have something that I do. I joined Orange Theory Fitness. I've been an OTF girly for the last, oh my gosh, five months now. And so that is something that I do on a weekly basis. And it's really helpful to just join a community that, you know, you move your body together, you de-stress, you get your endorphins going, all of that stuff. So that I forget sometimes because it's also like almost a little bit of punishment because it's hard working out. But yeah, massage and just like love to try to find as many soft moments as I possibly can.
Oh, we love that. Wishing you a lot of soft moments and yes, keeping your mental health and physical health ready for this fight. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, learning together, coming together to discuss these issues is one of the one of my favorite ways to connect and really be in community with you all. So thank you again to Annel, to Renae, to Jamie for coordinating everything on the back end. But I appreciate you all. Have a lovely afternoon. Thanks again.
Thank you, Sharia. Thank you, Annel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
so much, Renae.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.